Hello, everybody. Good morning. I want to take a quick stretch. Stand up, quickly stretch. Come on. It's early in the morning. Wake up. There we go. Good. All right. The last panel talked a lot about conversational design and talked about what it takes to design for voice as well, too. And I have a lot to say to the previous panelists, but I'm going to do it all in this talk instead. This is a talk about building computer conversations. And PullString, a company right down the street over here, we started over 5-6 years ago now, has been in voice the entire time. We've done products that range from, there was a discussion about your house coming alive and talking back and forth to you from Beauty and the Beast. We built the Hello House that Mattel shipped with Hello Barbie as well too, so you can talk to your Playhouse right now if you'd like to, with software we built as well. Done a lot of work right now in Alexa skills and Google Home Actions with our product PullString Converse that looks like that in the next slide. But I want to start my talk as we motivate this discussion about voice and design and computer conversation with this quote from Jonathan Foster from Microsoft that was put up a couple months ago in a blog he wrote. Authoring is required not because algorithms aren't brilliant, but because language is so brilliantly subtle. In this field overall, there's a lot of approach of automating everything out of computer conversation, but that's fundamentally challenging because language, as the thing we have all invented each other to communicate the human condition itself, is as broad as the human condition itself. So the challenge to the field of computing is to absorb, understand, and respond back at the level that humans do to each other, which is a very complex proposition, and not one we should expect, year 1 or even year 5, to get to the level of human fidelity conversation. To help computers talk with emotion, with connection, with the kind of empathy and sympathy we have for each other, does require the gift of authorship as well as the gift of algorithms together to achieve what we get today with Alexa's, Google Assistants, and the kind of conversation we see in market today. There's a quick product shot. 3, 2, 1. We'll talk more about that later, what PullString Converse looks like. And as we get into the talk here, I want to compare and contrast the way we talk to computers, the way we talk to each other for a second. So we talk to computers back and forth, as was referenced in the previous talk. Keyboards, mice, touchscreens, and the kinds of input devices, including clickers in my hand, that we've used for not 10, but 30, 40, 50 years in the field of computing are super precise, accurate, totally unambiguous. Did you press the screen? What coordinates? Did you touch your iPhone? Have you, in fact, won your Clash of Clans battle or not? Because the XY coordinate of your capacitive screen gives you the exact coordinates where you touch. And that's a great gift because computers are very precise that way. But a super small aperture, in particular compared to spoken language. If we use the words I love you or I hate you, those less than 12 characters each, in fact, cause thermonuclear global war, or people that get married and monarchies to carry on for thousands of years. Language is very different than how we input with computers. And on this side, when we talk to each other, words, sentences, gesture, expression all count. Am I standing still? Am I walking across the stage? Am I super into your question in the front row? Or I couldn't care less about the back, or I can't even see you guys at all. When we talk to someone at dinner or in a business context, all those other things, in addition to language, all matter. That's hugely imprecise, totally inaccurate, massively ambiguous. That's what makes language totally interesting. With near infinite aperture, to use the previous discussion, I love you and I hate you, mean huge amounts based on the context of who you're speaking to, where you're asking, am I on her knee, ring and finger to my loved one, telling them I love you, will you marry me? It's very different than being sarcastic, being like, I totally love that outfit you're wearing. But I'm saying the same thing both ways, but mean completely different things. Language to each other in human language is also shockingly efficient. This is why I think I appreciate the Google speaker a moment ago, commenting on starting to pick up the subtleties of pauses in language, clearing throats in language, getting sarcasm and subtext and context together too is going to be incredibly challenging as well. And all those things layer in to yield a higher fidelity level of computer conversation, just to characterize the difficulty in the space we face. Throw Google down. A conversation is the informal exchange of ideas by spoken words. And when we have two folks talking to each other, a couple of characteristics of a conversation. Why? I mentioned this earlier, to learn about each other and the world around us. Language spans the human condition. That's why we as humans invented it in all the various flavors of English, Spanish, Hebrew, Russian, Italian, and all the other languages we have today in spoken form. Also things like ASL for American Sign Language as well too, is as rich as a spoken language, even though it is gestural. Those of you who may not know, American Sign Language also has accents. So you can sign from Texas, you can sign from California, you can sign from New York. You also can sign by geographies, and
English Sign Language actually is more like Canadian, and French Sign Language is more like American Sign Language, interestingly as well too. We can go on that for a long time. Subjects and context both matter here, and who we're talking to, the person we're chatting with in a conversation about, is what we're talking about switching out. In a computer conversation, we swap one out with the computer, put them in, and it's kind of like thinking about creating an interactive screenplay from a design perspective. I use the word screenplay because screenplays are full of dialogue, also stage direction, but most importantly dialogue. Character A says this, character B says that. Interactive I take from the field of gaming. And gaming is important to talk about because it's one of the highest levels of achievement in the interactive arts. Designing in the interactive arts is not designing in the linear arts. They're very different. So if you walk away from this talk seeing the word screenplay and go, I need to hire some writers, yeah, you should do that. But you should hire the writers who are also gamers at night and are really good at Destiny. Those folks who understand both the interactive arts and how to design and create for them, and what it means to not just respect and appreciate, but call in what the user's doing into the design experience itself, design for agency at the right times, what motivates a gamer to play or to not play, as well as someone who's gifted in the language arts, understands words and dialogue and phrase. Those two things together is what I think characterizes some of the best designers in the space today. Some examples now of how I think it's impossible to separate what you're saying from thinking about the person you're saying it to. No, I am your father. Everybody knows that's Darth Vader. We'll pick a couple easy ones here too. To be or not to be. We'll go to Hamlet. I have a dream. Martin Luther King. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. HAL 9000 is a fictional computer. And of course, Mommy, which are my kids yelling for actually me. Either way. In all these examples, when you see just the dialogue itself or hear that quote, the image or the memory of the person you're speaking to, the character from the film, the real person in your house, the fictional design or not, are inseparable. And that's very important because you as designers who are creating, let's go with Alexa skills and awesome Google Home actions and the rest, are designing a conversation, and the people who are going to speak to you in their houses, through their homes and through their echoes, will not only be hearing the dialogue you're saying and answering back, maybe in some e-commerce transaction or asking about the weather, but will also be considering that personality, tone, mood, and style of the character who just spoke to them. Always, those two concepts are inseparable in this field. So it's very important to consider that as a designer. And some of the things one wants to consider specifically now, I'll list a few out here, that are important to think about when you're both building and the tools that you use. Content and intent both matter here. Intent is a big party for Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and other companies, IBM's here today as well, who offer intent recognition engines that also, like automatic speech recognition, are very important advances in the field in the last 5 years to get us all to party in this room here now. I celebrate that. We should also celebrate content, which is what you say back. Understanding intent is understanding what's said, content's what you respond back with, and both matter. If you really get good at intent recognition and don't really consider how you respond back, you've solved half the problem really, really well. And the other half, you're like, I don't really care what you say back. That's a cheese out. We shouldn't do that. Looking at a project, thank you, that you're working on yourself or a thing you're building for Alexa or Google in a voice-based space, this is actually also true of text-based bots as well too. Making sure that you stack the project with talent on both sides and put a roughly even amount of effort into both halves of the conversation is a great path towards success in the field. And don't overweight one over the other. Context is talked a lot about as well too, and the word's used in a lot of different ways. If our tools and techniques are not fully context aware, you really diminish your chances of understanding successfully human spoken language. We struggle today with things like subtext. We struggle today with things like pregnant pauses and people change direction in a conversation as well. So we have to do the best we can to hold on to what was said both one turn ago, about 5 turns ago, and then actually the last session you started last week as well too, and bring that into the probability of understanding what's said going forward. Iteration and creative control, I believe, is pretty strongly lacking in the space overall. When you're building in a space to here that is one of the interactive arts, and you're trying to design something better, the way that happens is you try something, you test it, and then you hear it back in conversation again. The same way a musician would practice on a set of drums or a guitar. You have to practice with your dialogue, write it, talk to it, talk back to it, try to trick it, see what happens next, does it respond the way you want it to or not, and work with the material over time. The faster you can turn something that way, the faster you can make it suck less. And the less it sucks, the better it gets. That's a very important part of why compiling code out to a whole loop that takes half an hour to get a new way to test your skill is totally fatiguing. That's why game engines are designed to very quickly in real time give you a sense back of what you're doing as you design a game, and why the tools and techniques in this space should strive for a similar goal as well. The faster the iteration time, the greater the creative control and expressivity you have. And I want to throw down here for a comment about machine learning, broadly speaking. I have a frustration in the field, and as a person who runs a company in this field, I share in this problem with all of you in the audience here. Black boxes suck as a way to build something in general. And when someone says, oh, your intent's not matching right, what should I do? You should give it more data. Okay, how much more? What more? In what way should it be more? But now I gave it more and now it overmatches or matches too constrained. Can I give it less data? How does that work? And black box crash and people's heads explode. In general, linearity is not the issue here. I don't really care about that. Riding a bicycle is highly nonlinear. In fact, does anybody know the equations of motion for riding a bicycle? No, because they're not knowable yet. Ha, you can't. But you can all ride bikes. Who here rides a bicycle? Yeah, thank you. Okay, hands up, right? So we all know how to do that because it's predictable. The human mind is shockingly good at mapping nonlinear processes like balancing on a moving bicycle, when a closed form system of equations does not today fully explain how a bike, when you shove it down the street, still goes wobble wobble 100 yards down before it crashes. But we all know how to ride a bike. So predictable processes are super helpful, all in for that, and I think it's important as a field we all step up to offer tools and techniques that bring machine learning further into the process, but in a more predictable way. That's a challenge for this room I'm signing up for as well. Now, back to the characters that we speak to in computer conversation. Your voice app has a character backstory, motivation, tone, mood, and style, because you're speaking to something. We talked about earlier, when you speak to something, you can't separate both the language you're exchanging and thinking about who you're speaking to. Tone, mood, and style, backstory, motivation are true for everybody in this room. So when we're chatting over fancy Danishes at the break in a minute, talking, say hi to each other, we're all going to be exchanging words back and forth and thinking about who we're talking to. And do you want to do business with them? Are we learning something new from them? Maybe we have a deal to do with them or not. Maybe find a new company I can work with or not. You need to design and deliver on these things successfully, because if you don't, your audience will create them for you. This is often the case when people don't consider the design advocacy deep enough about what they're saying and how they're designing for, and leave that to the user in their kitchen to figure out they think that about your brand or think that about your company. You strongly want to be in control of that. And in this field, the way to do that is both by doing the best you can at intent recognition to understand what's said, and doing the best you can at responding back with the content that you deliver back to your audience. I'm going to quote Robert McKee. Those of you may or may not know him as a Hollywood screenwriting, I dare say expert, not really an expert, but a pontificator in the space, who's written a great book called Story you can read too. But I want to pull this one sentence out. If a character insists on telling the truth when a lie would save his life, then we sense that honesty is the core of that character's particular nature. Decisions under pressure matter. Pressure is essential, and true character is revealed in the choices one makes only when under pressure. So, hey, Google Maps, where's the SuperBot conference? Bunk, bunk, 845 Market Street. Not interesting. That's a pretty straight-ahead question. But when you get an off-topic request, a comment, there's an error in recognition, something goes not quite as you expect, the pressure is now on. Hey, Google Maps, I want to go to vacation next year in the Alps to go skiing. Where should I go? That's sort of an off-axis question for Google Maps to answer. But what does it do now? Siri goes, bunk, bunk, Wikipedia. No, that's not okay. Siri, you should change that. How one designs for the situations when the off-axis question comes in, someone says something you don't expect, someone answers a question in an opposite or a purposely controversial way, someone says a bad word to you. We talked about that in the last talk as well, too. How you respond there is super critical to consider, because it's at that moment that the true nature of your character, your brand, your company that's talking back to an audience is revealed. Time to talk up now because we're running out of time here. And the last slides. I'll leave you with the fundamental creative question of the field. The more you go down this direction of specific character and design, the more memorable you'll become. Engagement retention will go up. That's great. At the same time, the more you go down the road of specific characters, the more you're likely to segment your audience and may polarize or alienate them. As a simple test, Trump, Hillary. room to split, actually 49-51 quickly. So I took the audience smack down the middle and threw half of them out. A company like Google can't do that. Google is trying to reach a 99.99% of the world's audience, not 49.9 or 51.1. So this is why this is super tricky. If you answered straight ahead and dead neutral, you will probably accommodate everybody, but do it in a kind of boring way. The more specific you get, probably you'll excite half the audience to an extreme position and alienate half. And in between there sits the essential creative balance of this field. I'll share with you. Thanks so much for the talk. You can find out more about PullString and the tools you sell at PullString.com. And there's a pretty picture of Converse. And I'm out. There we go.
Thank you very much. We probably have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Start here. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This is on mic 3.
Thank you for the great presentation. Now, when it comes to providing a neutral answer, what is your take on using technology to synthesize the answer and the issue of fake news?
In a couple ways. Do you mean like in the actual text-to-speech, like rendering versus a synthetic voice or recorded voice, or do you mean?
No. What I mean is, I have content which is raw, and I know you, I know Oren, and I would like to synthesize my raw content to make it contextualize as per per the context of the conversation. Now you can push this so far before it turns into something fake. Now my question is, have you thought about this? How far you can push the technology to contextualize your raw knowledge to make it more personable, or to make it personalized?
I feel like I can answer the last 2/3 of your question, but the first third about how it transformed into something fake on the way in got me a little bit confused. Are you suggesting that because of context awareness that I might distort an otherwise, I dare say here, this is a tricky question, a fact that I have in some database that I'm pulling forward turns to something inaccurate in the course of its delivery? Yeah, okay. I suppose then I'll have to make a couple of assertions to give an example here. Let's assert for a minute that CNN is real news for a moment. And if it is, but I put a super sarcastic voice in front of it and delivered the news like totally like I don't even care, does it turn into something that's actually a mockery of itself? I think that, yes, one could do that. That is, in a sense, comedy. And done by Jon Stewart, I'm picking audiences here carefully here, might be quite enjoyable as a way, through the act of sarcasm, becomes an act of effectively criticism or ridicule using humor to do it. That's an incredibly sophisticated proposition that humans can do if you're a good comedian. I think we're far from that today in synthesized language, but I bet you we'll have that discussion in a couple years in the future. And I don't really have an answer for you about how to protect against that. I would say that today, a very bad circumstance that might arise if someone is not in control of their design to accidentally cause that result to happen. And my talk really strongly tries to emphasize being assertive with what you're trying to design will, I think, eliminate the risk you might accidentally end up in a place making fun of something that you're trying not to. It's sort of a reverse half answer to your question. Hopefully that was okay. One more? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
cool.
much.